Hello and welcome to the JW Thoughts channel. My name is Wally and today we are going to be looking at one of the more obviously blatant in-your-face things that Watchtower absolutely just has wrong, and kind of for no reason, or at least I can't really think of a reason for it, but it is quite fascinating. But before we get into that, thank you so much to everyone that likes the videos and subscribes. It helps it get out to more people on YouTube. And hey, if you subscribe, I got a lot of cool content. I don't plan on slowing down. Big shout out and thank you to everyone that has joined my Patreon. It just helps keep the ship afloat, I suppose, would be the best way to put it. Anyway, with all of that being said, we are going to look at one of the biggest Watchtower just kind of boneheaded mistakes that they make when it comes to their reading of the Bible. With all that being said, let's do this. Right, so I am doing this as part of the Bible Reading with Wally. As many of you know, we're going through book by book by book and talking about different things that I found interesting while I was waking up from my Watchtower indoctrination, and verses and scriptures and stories that helped me kind of see the Bible in a different light from that fundamentalist Watchtower way of seeing things, because it is very unique how Watchtower does look at the Bible itself, because they have this, I know I use it all the time, but it's a yellow highlighter and a green highlighter, and that basically one represents things that are literal and one represents things that are like figurative. So it is very odd, and it doesn't actually hold up and make sense how they read the Bible. And I think this is one of the most obvious examples of that. So I was reading 2nd Chronicles and I came to chapter 6. And in verse 4 it says, and he went on to say, "Blessed be Jehovah, the God of Israel, who spoke with his own mouth with David my father, and by his own hands has given fulfillment," saying. So here we have Solomon proclaiming that Jehovah spoke directly to David. And I think there are a few Bible scholars that say the last person in the Hebrew scriptures that God spoke with is Solomon and David, but we won't be going down that because I think there's other examples. Anyway, and then later on in chapter 7, we have in verse 12, it says, "Jehovah now appeared to Solomon during the night and said to him." And then it goes on to say what he said to him. So I just found this interesting because as a Jehovah's Witness growing up, if anyone ever asks, hey, what about God speaking in the Old Testament? Or, I mean, it's very rare that that happens, but the answer was always the only time that God spoke was when Jesus, at his birth, at his death, and at the transfiguration. Those are the 3 times. And I went and double checked to see if they were still teaching this. And as far as 2019, I believe, it looks like they say that the first time that God spoke, I think there was a 2019 Watchtower that says Mark chapter 1 verse 9 through 11 records the first occasion when Jehovah spoke from heaven. So this was, I don't know if the from heaven thing is a little bit different, but as far as my understanding of their teaching, they say that the first time God ever really speaks is at Jesus' birth. Or not birth, sorry, his baptism. So, how do you make sense of this when you have an example of first in chapter 6 where he says, he spoke with his own mouth to my father? So at least David, probably relaying what was happening to his son Solomon, said, yeah, God spoke directly to me. And then you have in verse 7, Jehovah now appeared to Solomon and during the night and said to him. Now, there are hundreds of examples in the Bible of God or Jehovah speaking directly to people. All the way from Adam to Ahaz, it just goes on and on. So here's just a couple examples that I find particularly like on the nose. So Leviticus 1:1 says, "And Jehovah proceeded to call Moses and speak to him out of the tent of meeting." Numbers 1:1, "And Jehovah proceeded to speak to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai." Isaiah 7:10, "And Jehovah went on speaking some more to Ahaz, saying." And then I think the most direct example is 2 Samuel 22:14. "From heaven Jehovah began to thunder, and the Most High himself began to give forth his voice." Now, Watchtower reads that, and they do the little highlighter trick where they say, well, when it says give forth his voice, what it's really saying is that an angel was the one that was giving the message. Jehovah uses his angels to carry out all of these different messages. And that is very strange. What possibly is the reason for that conclusion? And honestly, I couldn't find anything. They don't really give a good justification that's rational. And I was looking at other churches, and I couldn't really find any other religious institutions that were saying, yeah, the only time God spoke was when Jesus was baptized, the transfiguration, and at his death. And so what's the reason? Why does Watchtower have this concept where, no, we can't have it be that in Genesis, when God is speaking to Adam, he can't be just speaking to Adam. He has to be using some sort of mediator, some sort of little voice. I guess one thing I was thinking was they want to try and impress on people's minds that God will only use a specific channel to direct his people. So God won't just directly go to a person. He has to go to an angel. The angel passes on the message to the prophet at the time, or whatever it might be. And then that prophet or whatever relays that message back onto God's people at the time. And I guess that would make sense because Watchtower strips away people's own personal spirituality and basically holds it captive and says, no, you can only be a spiritual person if you listen to us. And look, God has always operated through this channel of spiritual information, and he uses angels, and the angels speak to prophets. So maybe that has something to do with it, but that seems a little thin in my opinion. And I couldn't really come up, maybe I'm just being kind of like a potato brain today, but I couldn't really come up with any other reasons that Watchtower might go and say this. So if anyone has any ideas, make sure you comment below, because it is very interesting and fascinating to kind of break all of these things apart. Now, this is actually going to be a 2-for-1 for the Book of Chronicles. So I know I don't want these being too long of a video, so we're going to go as fast as possible. And actually sticking in 2 Chronicles chapter 7, there was something, and this was something when I was initially waking up from my, lifelong indoctrination. And it was something that bothered me because at certain points in my life, I've been a vegan and a vegetarian, and please, we're not going to make this a debate about the morality of eating meat. So any comments that you want to make about it, just stop doing it right now. Because I fall on both sides of it at different points in my life. So personal choice. Anyway, I know the carbon emissions thing is probably one of the more compelling arguments, but again, don't make that argument. Don't comment. Anyway, in 2 Chronicles chapter 7 and verse 5, sorry, I'm turning my head away from the mic. You guys probably couldn't hear me. In 2 Chronicles 7 verse 5, it says, "And King Solomon went on offering the sacrifice of 22,000 cattle and 120,000 sheep. Thus the king and all the people inaugurated the house of the true God." So after he gets done with building the temple for Jehovah, And this is actually kind of interesting because they have these accounts where the temple was filled with a cloud of Jehovah. And I couldn't help but thinking as I was reading this, but you also were sacrificing all of these animals, so that cloud could just be smoke, because you're burning 120,000 sheep and 22,000 cattle. So, oh look, guys, we have this fire, and now look, the cloud of Jehovah is all around us.
That is fucking disgusting.
At the idea of him, like, look everybody, the cloud of Jehovah has filled the temple. Like, bro, you just started a fire. But anyway, that to one side. These numbers are staggering. And I think conservative estimates for how many animals are sacrificed in the Bible it's like 1.2 million. Which is a lot.
This is a load of barnacles.
So I wanted to just calculate how many people could be fed with this burnt offering that was done at the inauguration of Solomon's temple. So from what I could work out, the cattle basically equals about 9.6 million pounds of meat, or 9.7, somewhere in there. And then the sheep equals about 7.2 million. So then I just looked at how many pounds of meat that the average person living in Israel eats today, and just made that sort of correlation, if you will. So, I mean, I know it's like bad not to like, who knows what they ate back then? Who knows how many people were there at the time of Solomon and David? I don't think there was hundreds of thousands of people there. But anyway, we'll put that to one side because obviously these numbers are inflated. There's no way that at that time there was 120,000 sheep in Israel with that small group of people that were living there. That's what. Hi, Zizi. Sorry about that. Anyway, so with all of those qualifiers being said, it's about for 1 year of the average Israeli's consumption of meat in 2017, it would be 79,000 people, roughly. 79,000 people that wouldn't have to worry about their food for an entire year was put on a fire and just left to burn, and no one could eat anything from it because it was just burned to ash. And all of this is because God has an obsession. The God of Israel, Jehovah, whatever, it has an absolute obsession with smelling blood and burnt carcasses. I mean, it's really gruesome when you think about it. But this is something that is meant to be a positive. It's meant to be like, look how great Solomon was because he sacrificed all of these animals. And why would God look at people that are no doubt struggling because food shortage is just ubiquitous in this time? He's looking at people that the average person is struggling mightily. I'm assuming that if it's 79,000 in 2017, that, you know, they eat that much meat, or that's how much meat would have fed these people. I'm guessing they had at least like half of that meat available to that amount of meat. So it's probably something closer to like 160,000 people that it would feed, which would be the entire nation. So basically the entire nation's meat supply was burned for an entire year because God likes the smell of it. That seems pretty messed up to me. That seems not okay. I think if I'm the almighty God and I don't have a nose, I can't really enjoy this. And why am I getting enjoyment from watching living animals just butchered and burnt to a crisp for no reason other than my pleasure? Like, what kind of moral creature am I that says, hey, I'm just going to be completely happy with the only benefit of hundreds of thousands of animals being killed is I figuratively like the smell of it. That's easy. I don't understand that. I can't get my head around it. So I found that kind of interesting from the book of 2nd Chronicles. Yes, there's a lot of goofy stuff in there. I could have talked about Ahaziah being a son that's older than his father. That one's probably one of the big ones. But anyway, there's a lot of fun stuff. So maybe when we go back through the Bible a second time, we'll get into all that. With all of that being said, if you are still watching, come on, subscribe to the channel. Let's make it happen. I think 50% of people still aren't subscribed. I think it's actually like 58%. So subscribe to the channel. Make sure you drop a like on this video. And it's time to see ZZ do some wicked stunts. Are you wicked? Oh yeah, you're wicked.